गुड इवनिंग ऑल। हाँ, तो मुझसे पहले आ गए। हाँ, सब लोग। अ, किरण, मोहित, उस्तत, दर्शन, हिमांशु, कंचन, राजीव, मनीषा, भूमिका, दीक्षा। सो हाउ वाज चैप्टर 6? डिड यू go through the MCQs, the chapter chart, the case study, and the questions, and the whole chapter? How did you find it? The chapter is a bit technical, I agree, but being an auditor, SA 315 is really necessary for us. So we can't run away from the technicality part, the computers part, right? Okay. So how's everyone? And how was chapter 6? Just let me know before we move further with chapter 7, audit sampling. Dipanshu, Dikshita, Neeraj, Govinda, Raju. I'm good, Darshan. Thank you. Okay. Chaliye. So let's move with today's chapter, chapter 7, audit sampling. So मैंने आप लोगों को बताया था that chapter 1 to 4 audit basics, right? From chapter 5 onwards, smaller topics: fraud, automated environment, sampling, analytical procedure, the audit tools, right? Understanding the basics, understanding the tools, then start applying on the practical audit parts. Chapter 9, audit of financial statements. Chapter 10, company audit. Chapter 11, audit report. Chapter 12, bank audit. Chapter 13, audit of other entities, right? So अभी जो हमारा आज का चैप्टर है, that is audit sampling. चलिए, let us first discuss what is sampling. So ब्लड टेस्ट करवाया कभी? हाँ जी, ब्लड टेस्ट करवाया कभी? ऑलमोस्ट, आई सपोज एवरी वन ऑफ यू. So what is the difference uh, when they prick a pin on your finger, right, and collect a sample from over here, and when they look for a vein from your arm and collect a sample from over there? आपके हाथ की उंगली में से सैंपल लेना और आपके बाजू की वेन में से सैंपल लेना. आप सैंपल का मतलब तो समझ में आता है आपको, डिफरेंस क्या है? क्यों उन्हें वेन तक जाने की जरूरत पड़ी जब यहां से भी खून निकल रहा है, उंगली से भी? तो यहां तक क्यों जा रहे हैं खून लेने के लिए? क्यों? और एक सैंपल, देखिए, अगर हम ब्लड सैंपलिंग, ब्लड टेस्ट करवा रहे हैं, व्हाट इज दैट इज अ बेस्ट एग्जांपल ऑफ सैंपलिंग, नो? लैब टेस्ट, मेडिकल टेस्ट, because whatever the blood is running throughout our body, it carries the same composition, whether it is running through the veins in the legs, in the arms, whatever part of your body. एग्जैक्टली, मोहित इज करेक्ट, साइज ऑफ सैंपल। देखिए, जब ये सैम्पलिंग चैप्टर स्टार्ट करने से पहले जस्ट वांट टू बी क्लियर विद हाउ इज size important. This is one of the factors which we are going to take up in the next session in our topic of sampling process. So sampling, first of all, we need to understand it is nothing like this that हाँ थोड़ा सा उठाया और सैंपल बन गया। जब हम यहाँ से टेस्ट करा रहे हैं, उस टेस्ट के लिए इट्स लाइक जस्ट योर ब्लड ग्रुप। आपने जब भी कभी ब्लड ग्रुप टेस्ट करवाना होगा, यहाँ से प्रिक करेंगे, या ग्लूकोज टेस्ट करना है, ब्लड शुगर टेस्ट करना है, तो यहाँ से भी ग्लूकोमीटर्स आजकल तो वी हैव देम इन आवर होम्स। सो अ prick of the pen with a blood drop is enough. But for other major medical tests, the blood from over here is not enough. We need more quantity. It is not like this that will collect the whole blood from the human body, but an enough sample so as to carry out different kinds of medical tests. We should not run out of blood to carry out our multiple tests. That is why the difference is between sample size and the quantity of sample. So when your mom cooks food, she's like, or who you yourself cook food for the family, for yourself. What do you do? ये जरा चख के बताइए नमक ठीक है या नहीं है। अभी आज someone in the family ना, जरा चख के बताइए नमक ठीक है, मीठा ठीक है। So अब क्या हम जितना खाना बनाया, जितनी सब्जी बनाई है, जो भी बनाया हमने, वो सारा का सारा खिला देते हैं? तो चख के बताना, वो चखने में सब खत्म ही हो जाएगा। थोड़ा सा सैंपल, वो सैंपल हमें बताता है पूरा जो हमारा सब्जेक्ट है उसके अंदर क्या प्रॉब्लम है, क्या सही है, और क्या उसमें इंप्रूव किया जा सकता है। तो कुछ बेसिक टर्म्स हैं जब हम ब्लड टेस्ट करते हैं। जो हमारा सब्जेक्ट होता है, हमारा पॉपुलेशन बोलते हैं। पॉपुलेशन इज दैट पर्टिकुलर सब्जेक्ट मैटर जिसमें से सैंपल निकाला जाता है। और पॉपुलेशन का एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट कैरेक्टरिस्टिक है, दैट उसे होमोजेनस होना पड़ता है, तभी आप सैंपल आपको एग्जैक्ट रिजल्ट दे पाएगा। अगर सब्जी वन, आलू की सब्जी आप टेस्ट कर रहे हैं, तो आप पनीर की सब्जी का नहीं बता सकते उसमें क्या कमी है, क्या मसाला, या वेयर इज अ डिफरेंस। आप उसी सब्जी का बता सकते हैं। पॉपुलेशन इज आलू की सब्जी, मसाले कम है, तीखा कम है, नमक कम है, वो आपने एक स्पून सैंपल लिया और उससे आपने बता दिया यहाँ पे इसको इंप्रूव किया जा सकता है। तो आलू की सब्जी इज द whatever सब्जी इट इज, द होमोजेनियस पॉपुलेशन। Similarly, the person whose blood is being tested, his blood is the homogeneous population. जिसका टेस्ट, जिसके ब्लड के ऊपर टेस्ट किया जा रहा है, उसी के बारे में बताया जा सकता है। ठीक, मोहित ने बड़ा अच्छा एग्जांपल दिया, राइस का सैंपल। अच्छा, इट्स नॉट अबाउट कुक्ड फूड ओनली। व्हेन यू गो टू स्टोर्स, right, and if you are not willing to purchase packed grains or pulses or millets, right, what do? They are put over there in gunny bags. So have you been with anyone from your family, any elder from your family, to purchase some grocery from the local Karyana store, local retail store, grocery store? What do we do over there? वहां जाते हैं, गनी बैग में से हाथ मारकर सैंपल चेक करते हैं। Is it okay? Then we order fruit, vegetables. What do? What whenever you have you might have visited with one of your elders from the family, they'll eat that gajar, that carrot, or they'll just smell the fruit or the vegetable, and then they'll say, yeah, it is fine. Or the fruit vendor would say, he'll cut one in front of you, sir, please taste कीजिए, मीठा है, अच्छा है, हाँ, it is good, हमें और पैक कर दीजिए। तो हमारे आसपास, all around us, we have numerous examples of sampling. And now when we use that particular, देखिए सैम्पलिंग कितनी जगह हमारे आसपास यूज हो रही है, अब हम उसे अपने प्रोफेशनल लाइफ में यूज करना है. अब प्रोफेशनल लाइफ में हमारा सब्जेक्ट मैटर है क्या? क्लाइंट के कंट्रोल्स, क्लाइंट की फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स, क्लाइंट के लेजर, right? All the assertions, that is our population. If you are doing a stock audit, stock आपकी population है. If you are doing accounts receivable audit, debtors आपके लिए population है. और आपको देखना है भी आपने उसके अंदर से सैंपल्स कैसे विड्रॉ करने, ड्रॉ सैंपल्स करने, कैसे क्रैक क्राइटेरिया आपको सेट करना. आपका क्राइटेरिया बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होगा, किस बेसिस पे आपको सैंपल्स ड्रॉ करना. सो पॉपुलेशन क्या होती है हमारे प्रोफेशनल लाइफ में, सैंपल क्या है, सैंपलिंग प्रोसेस क्या है, सैंपल से रिलेटेड रिस्क क्या है हमारी ऑडिट में, और क्या क्या मेथड्स हैं जिनके थ्रू हम सैंपल्स कलेक्ट कर सकते हैं. फिर उन सैंपल्स का जो रिजल्ट आएगा उसे हम कैसे यूज कर सकते हैं अपने ऑडिट के अंदर, और उन मेथड्स के रिजल्ट्स को यूज करते हुए ऑडिट के अंदर हम कैसे कंक्लूजन पर जा सकते हैं. दिस इज व्हाट दिस होल चैप्टर इज ऑल अबाउट. ओके, सो लेट्स स्टडी विद द चैप्टर. Okay, audit sampling. Again, we have divided the chapter into parts. Part general, part 1 is the general part, where we have audit sampling's meaning and the objective of audit sampling, then the scope of audit sampling, what, how, where we can use audit sampling, what is the requirement of audit sampling, why do we use it, then what is the sampling plan. You have to plan for sampling. What sample are you going to extract, on what criteria, based upon what criteria are you going to extract the sample. The terms is what? Basically, the terms used in this chapter in the audit sampling, some professional terms. Then part 2, we have the sampling approaches. What is statistical sampling? What is non-statistical sampling? A comparison of statistical and non-statistical sampling. Then appropriateness. Appropriateness is which method, statistical, non-statistical. Which method is appropriate in what situation? Where we can use statistical sampling and where we can use non-statistical sampling. Then the third part is the sampling risk, and the fourth part and the final part is sampling process. Now, coming on to meaning and objective. We knew you are covering essay 530 as well with it. Within this chapter, essay 530, audit sampling is also being covered. So meaning and objective with reference to essay 530. So here we go. Sampling. Again, divided the definition. We have divided the definition. So here we go. Sampling refers to application. Application means lagana of audit procedures. So whatever audit procedures we have designed as per chapter 3, applying them to less than 100% of the items. See, the population is 100%. The population is 100%. So 100% is equal to population of the subject matter. Population, right? To less than 100% of less than 100% of items within a population relevant under audit. Whatever is relevant under audit, whatever criteria, whatever subject matter we are auditing, such that all sampling units, whatever samples we can draw from the population, all such units, that is all the items in the population, have an equal chance of selection. Probability is equal for anyone getting picked up. To ensure that the items selected represent the entire population. Whatever sample you are drawing from the population, it should be a representative of the entire population. जो भी आप सिलेक्ट कर रहे हैं, किसी भी आइटम को सिलेक्ट कर रहे हैं, वो आइटम पूरी पॉपुलेशन को रिप्रेजेंट करती हो, एक्सेप्शनल ना हो. Which enables the auditor to draw conclusions and express his opinion based on a predetermined objective. What was his objective? He had to express his opinion on controls. He had to express his opinion on assertions at financial statement level. He had to express his opinion on the financial statements as a whole. So the objective is predetermined, right? The objective, Sudhanshu will get to that. The objective is predetermined. So this is the definition of audit sampling. Application of audit procedures to on what? Less than 100% of items. How? Such that all sampling units have an equal chance of selection. Why? To ensure that the items selected represent the entire population. Purpose: enables the auditor to draw conclusions and express his opinion. Opinion on what? Based on a predetermined objective. So we have divided the definition into 6 parts, and here you have audit sampling. What is the objective of audit sampling? To provide a reasonable, which can be proved with logic, a reasonable basis for the auditor to draw conclusions about the population from which the sample has been selected, right? From which the sample has been selected. Okay? Chale. So, sampling units. For example, I am auditing audit of receivables. Okay? So, my population would be debtors and bill receivables. Sample would be, it could be any criteria. Persons from all the debtors from north, south, east, like this. And what could be the other basis of sample? Drawing samples on the basis of amount. Debtors less than 10,000. Samples we are drawing. We are drawing samples from debtors less than 10,000, less than 20,000. What could be the other criteria? Debtors by name. Could be debtors by name. We are selecting all the debtors whose name starts with S. Practically, you can apply anything, but it should be reasonable, right? In the case of, let us take the case of, okay, bank accounts. Or let us take fixed assets. So population is fixed asset. What could be a sample? Sample could be 2 within the factory. Any 2 machineries within the factory, we'll check them, and any 2 from outside the factory. For example, we are auditing CCTV cameras. controls. Let us go to CCTV cameras. So what could be your sample? There are 10 CCTV cameras on each floor, right? And we as a sample select any 4 from each floor. We don't want to audit 100% of the CCTV cameras. We select 4 from each floor, check their strength, how the videos are being captured, how are their recordings being stored and retrieved, and then we'll give our opinion on the strength of control. Darshan, that is why I took this example. That is not at all reasonable. That is why we came to the term reasonable. Quite exceptional circumstances, but it is not a logic in audit. Picking a sample by a letter. That's when we came to reasonable, right? Okay, let's move ahead. Scope of SA 530. SA 530 becomes applicable when the auditor has decided to use audit sampling. So if the auditor wants to use audit sampling, then he has to follow SA 530. He cannot avoid the standards as set out in SA 530. Whatever SA 530 says, the auditor has to follow it while using audit sampling as a tool, as a technique in his audit. This standard deals with the auditor use of statistical and non-statistical sampling when designing and selecting the. So SA 530, the auditor has to use audit this essay for designing and selecting audit sample, performing test of controls and test of details on the selected sample, and evaluating result from the sample. So essay 530 आपने यूज करना है. ऑडिट सैंपल कैसा होना चाहिए? essay 530 आपको हेल्प करेगा. उसके ऊपर कौन से ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स टू टेस्ट कंट्रोल्स एंड टेस्ट डिटेल्स आप परफॉर्म कर सकते हैं, और जो रिजल्ट्स आएंगे उनको आप कैसे इवेल्युएट करेंगे ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ होल पॉपुलेशन. लैब टेक्नीशियन ने फिंगर प्रिक की और आपकी शुगर टेस्ट की, डायबिटीज, ग्लूकोज लेवल इन द बॉडी, राइट? हाउ आर द रिजल्ट्स इवेल्युएटेड? He performs tests on the blood sample or droplets taken from the finger, performs glucose tests on that particular drop, and comes with the result that yes, it is positive, the patient is diabetic, or it is negative, within the range, the patient is non-diabetic. So that is what evaluating the results from the sample. Whatever medical test it does, that is performing test of controls, test of details. Here it is medical test. So if we have a lot of tests being prescribed by the doctor, the lab technician will say, okay, no, pricking from collecting sample from the finger by pricking is not enough. I need to take blood from your vein. So he has designed and he has told me that he requires a big audit sample. I'll perform medical test and comes up with a test report. In the same case, the auditor will see what kind of sample he needs to design, what test he needs to perform on it, and how is he going to evaluate the results. आप लोगों को ये चीज समझ में आ रही है? What is test of controls and what is test of details? Can you please tell me what is test of controls and what is test of details? Sudhanshu, we have just started the chapter and you are running very fast. We have 2 sessions. I'll be answering each and every question. We have just started the chapter. Okay, can you please tell me, what do you know about test of controls and test of details? What are controls and what are details? Please. What are controls here and what are details? Yes, Shubham, right. Controls means internal controls. What is this details? It's a 7th chapter and these words have been repeating in every chapter. test of controls and test of details. ओके, ये मुझे सब बता रहे हैं, मुझे पता लग गया। इंटरनल कंट्रोल्स, जिसकी एग्जांपल आ जाती है बायोमेट्रिक्स, सीसीटीवी और मेंटेनेंस प्रोसीजर्स, एक्सेस राइट्स, एटसेट्रा। ये क्या बला है? व्हाट इज डिटेल्स? यस, वेरी गुड दर्शन। Very good, Jay. Jay Suneja. You have read about assertions. This is basically assertions at the financial statement level. Your account balances. Right? Transactions. So controls को ऑडिट करके डेफिशिएंसी इन इंटरनल कंट्रोल्स देखी जाती है, और यहां डिटेल्स में मिस स्टेटमेंट देखी जाती है। Good, Dikshita. Yeah, this is basically financial statement. The transactions, whatever transactions are taking place in the organization, these are the details, assertion levels. Okay, chaliye. So interplay between SA 500 and SA 530. SA 500 is audit evidence. SA 530 is audit sampling. Audit evidence deals. SA 500 deals with the auditor's responsibility to design and perform audit procedures to obtain sufficient, enough, sufficient means enough, appropriate, appropriate means relevant, sufficient means जितना हो सके, right? जितना जरूरी हो. Appropriate means जो हमारे काम का हो. So sufficient means enough, appropriate means relevant, sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to be able to draw reasonable conclusions on which to base his opinion. So SA 500 lays down the means available to the auditor for selecting the items for testing. One of these is audit sampling. तो SA 500 क्या कहता है? ये कहता है आप ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स इस तरीके से डिजाइन और परफॉर्म कीजिए, और इतने कीजिए ताकि आप अपनी ओपिनियन एक रीजनेबल कंक्लूजन बना सकें. So SA 530, one of the tools suggested by SA 500. That is why we say SA 530 complements SA 500. नहीं अहमद, no. Details, basically the details at the financial statement level, assertion level. चलिए. So what is the requirement of audit sampling? There is a growing realization that the traditional approach to audit is economically wasteful, because all the efforts are directed to check all transactions without any exception which leads to more emphasis on routine checking, not necessarily with the time and the cost involved. So basically, huge transactions. Traditional approach was to check each and every transaction, but they feel that if we can go through the samples, right, we can get to know about the exceptions which are there. It's not like this. The lab technician will collect sample from one arm, the second arm, then from one leg, in the second leg. We'll say the results could vary. It is not like that. There could be exceptional cases, but on a general basis, this is sampling works. There is a shift in favor of formal internal controls in the management. So internal controls have shifted. Now there are adequate and good quality internal controls being set up, being put into place by the organizations. So possibility of routine errors and frauds has greatly diminished. So there is no need to check each and every transaction or control. So the extensive routine checking, because auditor cannot do it in 2 or 3 or 4 days or in a particular time period. If we have to check each and every transaction, then there has to be extensive routine checking, and that could lead to quite a wastage of time and energy. More attention is required towards the questions of principles and controls with the curtailment of non-consequential routine checking. Non-consequential routine checking means which usually doesn't come with consequences. Because with routine checking, we think of extensive checking and vouching all the entries. Vouching means checking each and every voucher, paper, document, disregarding the concept of materiality. What is material, what is relevant, what is significant. We are not considering materiality anywhere and just going after the 100% population. The extent of checking to be undertaken is primarily a matter of judgment of the auditor. Nothing has been statutorily stated that you have to check this and that. If any organization provides an audit program or the law provides an audit program, then that is completely fine. Otherwise, it depends upon the professional judgment of the auditor. Nothing has been stated statutorily. Statutorily means under any law. कितना काम करना है, कैसे करना है, कब तक करना है, right? To ensure good and reasonable standard of work, he should adopt standards and techniques as suggested by our essays that can lead him to an informed professional opinion. On consideration of this fact, it can be said that it is in the interest of the auditor that if he decides to form his opinion on the basis of a part checking means sampling, he should adopt standards and techniques which are widely followed and have a recognized basis. So this matter of professional judgment, it could vary professionally, it could vary professionally from person to person. What could be professional of a significant matter of professional judgment for one auditor could not be for the other one. So to standardize that, while using sampling, while relying on his professional judgment, the auditor has to adopt standards and techniques widely followed and as set up in essays. Right? Chaliye. In most of the circumstances, the evidence available is not conclusive, and the auditor always takes a calculated risk in giving his opinion. Even by undertaking 100% checking of the transactions, the auditor does not derive absolute satisfaction. What is the difference between these two words? Conclusive and absolute. Sorry, conclusive and absolute are the same. Conclusive and absolute are the same. What is the difference between what does this word mean? Evidence available is not conclusive or it is not absolute. Basically, auditors always give reasonable assurance. What is a conclusive evidence or absolute? Okay, tell me the meaning of this word conclusive. If you have studied law, you might have found this word in your chapter of incorporation. Yes, Sudhanshu, right. Good, Darshan. Conclusive means no, Bhumika, no. Yes, Malvika, right. No, Varsha, see. This means prima facie. I hope you understand the word prima facie. सीधे तौर पे समझ में आ रहा है. सीधे तौर पे समझ में आ रहा है. Absolute means directly understood. सीधे तौर पे समझ में आ रहा है. Prima facie, on the face. Absolute. Conclusive means result reaching. You know, without any doubt. Conclusive evidence. Conclusive approach, which helps us in reaching the final conclusion. Reasonable means applying rationality and logic. Applying rationality and logic. Okay? Yes, Diksha, right. So these two words are really important. What is conclusive? You will find it most of the chapters of audit that auditor has given reasonable assurance. Conclusive evidence, evidence which leads us directly to the result, to the conclusion. That is a conclusive evidence. There is no doubt in that. Whatever has happened has happened. It is in front of you. This is the proof available, the evidence available. And reasonable is on the basis of facts and circumstances. You should be very much aware about the use of these professional words while writing answers. And these are the words whose meaning should be clear to you, and you have to make use of these words in your audit examination. That is what makes a strong answer, a professional answer. Okay. So, in most of the circumstances, the evidence available is not conclusive, right? It does not help us reach the conclusion prima facie. And the auditor always takes a calculated risk in giving his opinion. Even 100% checking does not give us guarantee that the auditor will be completely satisfied. Okay? By adopting the sampling technique, the auditor only checks a part of the whole mass of transactions. The satisfaction he used to derive earlier by checking all the transactions can be derived by a sample checking, provided he can put reliance on the internal controls and checks within the client's organization because they provide the reliability of controls. Reliance means he can trust. He can trust his place his trust on the entity's controls. If I am auditing an organization and I find the controls are really good, I'm satisfied with the controls, quite strong, I would design my samples accordingly. But if I find the controls weak, मुझे लग रहा है बहुत कुछ गड़बड़ है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के अंदर, मैं अपनी सैम्पलिंग उतनी ही कम करूंगा और एक्सटेंसिव चेकिंग ज्यादा करूंगा. तो अगर एक ऑडिटर ट्रस्ट कर सकता है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के इंटरनल कंट्रोल्स को, दैट मीन्स उसे लगता है दैट वो सैंपल्स भी ड्रॉ करेगा तो भी उसकी ऑडिटिंग जो है वो एक रीजनेबल रिजल्ट, एक रीजनेबल एविडेंस, इफ नॉट एब्सोल्यूट सेटिस्फैक्शन उसे मिलेगी. Sampling is used as a part of test of controls. Auditor will check few internal controls and their operating effectiveness. How are they operating? Based on this conclusion, he can then design the sample size for test of details. That is checking of transactions and balances. Now here we come. Test of details and test of controls. This is what we were discussing in the previous slide. So what is test of controls? Test of internal controls. The auditor will check few internal controls and their operating effectiveness. अगर वो अच्छा काम कर रहे हुए ऑडिटर इस नतीजे पे पहुंचेगा दैट वो अच्छा काम कर रहे हैं, तो अकॉर्डिंगली आगे ट्रांजैक्शंस और बैलेंसेस, ट्रांजैक्शंस योर प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस ट्रांजैक्शंस, बैलेंसेस जो आपके बैलेंस शीट में अकाउंट बैलेंसेस बोल रहे हैं, ठीक, उनको डिजाइन करने का सैंपल साइज, उनको कितना सैंपल साइज कैसा डिजाइन करना है, कितना होना चाहिए, टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल्स पे डिपेंड करेगा. अगर वो रिलाई कर सकता है कंट्रोल्स के ऊपर तो वो सैंपल साइज अकॉर्डिंगली अपना एडजस्ट करेगा. हो सकता है कम रखे, और अगर कंट्रोल्स इफेक्टिव नहीं है हो सकता है सैंपलिंग बढ़ा दे या बहुत कम सैंपलिंग यूज करे. If the controls are good as tested by the auditor can put his trust on these controls, and further he can design the size for details, sample size for test of details accordingly. I told you what are details. It is written over here, transactions and balances. So if internal control is satisfactory as tested by the auditor in its design and implementation, design means enough. A much smaller sample can give the auditor the necessary reliability of the result he obtains. On the other hand, if in certain areas controls are slack means not good, not operating effectively, ढीले हैं, or not properly implemented, the auditor may have to take a much larger sample for getting satisfactory result. Where controls are weak, the auditor will draw a larger sample. And where controls are good, the auditor concludes that, yeah, I have tested the controls, they are good, he can rely on smaller samples. Okay, chaliye. So, the sampling plan. What factors should be considered for deciding upon of checking on a sampling plan? सैम्पलिंग प्लान करते हुए, सैम्पलिंग का प्लान बनाते हुए कौन से फैक्टर्स आपको ध्यान में रखने हैं? साइज ऑफ द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अंडर ऑडिट. अब साइज ऑफ द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन अंडर ऑडिट से क्या हम समझते हैं? For example, देखिए, if it is a retailer, for example, it is a retailer whose accounts we are auditing, what we'll do? Why to draw samples, right? We can check 100% checking. If it is a big company with turnover in crores, a retailer, suppose it has turnover in lakhs, I'll see why should I go for a sample and let us check 100% of it. Or if there are debtors you are checking and there are only 5 debtors, major debtors, you say I'll go through all of them. But if they are 500 or 5,000, obviously you will select samples. Most of it will take a lot of time and energy to check 500 and 5,000. Based on certain criteria, you'll select samples out of 500 or 5,000. That is why size of organization under audit is a factor while designing a sampling plan, while developing a sampling plan during audit. State of internal controls, this we have done in the previous slide. If internal controls are good, satisfactory, smaller samples can be drawn. If controls are weak, then larger samples would be drawn. Adequacy and reliability of books and records. If the books which are need to be maintained by the organization are sufficient, whether in software, electronical form or physical form, all the vouchers they are maintaining, all the ledgers they are maintaining, fixed asset register they are maintaining, they have a proper control of authorizations, right? Okay, so they are maintaining all the requirements of documents and books as per the double entry system of accounting. I would say they are maintaining sufficient books. And reliability of books and records, the entries which are being posted over there, the transfer entries as well, they are interrelated connected entries as well, the consolidated entries as well, they are being recorded properly. You can rely upon these books and the records. So if they are insufficient and you cannot feel as an auditor that you can rely upon these books and records, obviously your sampling would be aggressive. You'll drive more samples and larger samples. But if you find that they are maintaining good books, adequate, and reliability is also good on these books, again it will affect your sampling plan and आप sample कम भी कर सकते हैं और छोटा भी कर सकते हैं. Tolerable error range. What is tolerable error range? Suppose you are studying for exam, right? And you are in your room and mom calls for dinner or lunch. You can say, I'm not hungry yet. I'm studying. To what level will you study? Till the level you are not feeling hungry, you will maintain that yeah, I'm not feeling hungry yet. I'm all full. There would be a range, there would be a level where your hunger would go out of tolerance, and yes, you will say, now I have to eat food. I cannot study further. You are having severe headache. Mom says, come on, take this headache medicine. Abhi, I can manage it. I don't want to take this medicine. Abhi, I can manage it. Natural immunity building up. But come a level that you feel that I'll have to take medicine, then I'm not able to do any work, any study. So that is a tolerable level. Now, what is error? So while sampling using audit techniques, there could be errors as well. Or There could be errors in books and records as well. So the auditor will decide a tolerable error range. So I can, like, it is completely fine if the errors are up to 10% or 20% of the samples drawn. Okay. For example, you have bought 10 apples from the market, and while bringing them home, you say, okay, I had to bring them in a haste or something, and I can understand 1 or 2 apples could be rotten or could get affected under the pressure of other 8 apples. So what do I say? My tolerable error range is 1 to 2, 10 to 20%. Out of those 10 apples, if 2 apples are rotten, it is fine. I have 8 good apples. Like, what is a tolerable error range? You have read in costing, normal loss. You know, have you read about normal loss in costing? Normal loss and abnormal loss. Abnormal loss is out of our tolerance. We don't want this to happen. Abnormal loss. Normal loss is what? This is usual. Hoga hi hoga. There is a big consignment of vegetables to be received by a vegetable vendor in the vegetables market. Suppose it is 100 kgs. While unloading it on during the transportation, the vegetable vendor feels that yes, I'll be getting only 95 kg. The 5 kg of 5 kg out of the 100 kg, I can assume, or it is usual that 5 kg gets destroyed or 5 kg is of no use. It becomes waste due to wear and tear. That is normal loss. So his tolerable range is 5 kg, 0 to 5 kg. In the same way, the auditor decides his tolerable error range. Yes, out of the population. For example, the auditor right. There are 100 debtor accounts to be checked. Right? The auditor needs to know what is his tolerable error range. The auditor says, okay, I can find there could be misstatements in 3 to 5 accounts. So this is what the tolerable error range as decided by the auditor. Auditor picks a sample of, you will say 10 debtors, right? And these 10 debtors, auditor finds that almost 6 to 7 accounts have problems. There is problem in recovery. There is problem in recording the balances or entries. What was its tolerable error range? 3 to 5 accounts. Right? He could say in 100 debtors, I could find 3 to 5 accounts. So when we apply the tolerable error range on 10 debtors, it is already coming over here 6 to 7. जब ऑडिटर की टॉलरेबल एरर रेंज बढ़ जाएगी, वो सैंपलिंग और करेगा. अपने सैंपलिंग प्लान में और सैंपलिंग इंक्लूड करेगा, इधर नंबर वाइज और क्वांटिटी वाइज. बट अगर इससे कम रहेगी एरर रेंज, तो जितनी सैंपलिंग से वो चल रहा है वो कहेगा ठीक है, आई एम गोइंग राइट. So this tolerable error range is the level of errors that is considered standard by the auditor. अगर इससे ज्यादा एरर्स निकलेंगे तो ऑडिटर सैम्पलिंग इंक्रीज करेगा, इससे कम एरर्स निकलेंगे while auditing on the samples तो वो ऐसे ही कंटिन्यू करेगा सैम्पलिंग को. Yes, you could understand with the concept of normal loss. अच्छा, जिन लोगों ने कॉस्टिंग स्टार्ट नहीं किया है, okay, fine. Sir, if the tolerable error range is high, then the sampler required would be. So we'll come to that, Darshan. Now, the fifth part is degree of the desired confidence. Degree of the desired confidence, the desired satisfaction the auditor wants. The diminishing the law of marginal utility, law of satisfaction. If the auditor is a conservative one, he needs a higher satisfaction. Obviously, he'll be ready to do higher checking. But if he's fine with normal results, he's fine, he's okay, that whatever I'm checking, it seems to be good. His risk-bearing capacity is good. That will also affect his sampling pen, the personal professional judgment and professional skepticism of the auditor. So these are the factors that should be considered for deciding upon the extent of checking on a sampling plan. कितना आपको चेक करना है, कितना सैंपल्स आपको ड्रॉ करना है. हिमांशु, एग्जाम्पल मैंने वैसे ही जस्ट टॉलरेबल एरर समझाने के लिए लिया है. प्रॉपर एग्जाम्पल हम जब आगे हमारे पास ये टर्म आएगी हम डेफिनेटली करेंगे. वी हैव अ फुल फ्लेज्ड टॉपिक ऑन टॉलरेबल एरर एंड हाउ टू डील विद इट. ओके, तब हम डेफिनेटली इसको उठाएंगे दोबारा. अभी जो मैंने एग्जाम्पल ये जस्ट टॉलरेबल एरर समझाने के लिए लिया है, टॉलरेबल एरर होता क्या है. ठीक है हिमांशु, चलिए आगे चलते हैं. So sampling can never bring complete reliability that you are 100% satisfied or 100% good to go with. It cannot give precisely accurate results. It is a process of estimation. It may have some error. What error is tolerable for a particular matter under examination is a matter of individual's judgment in that particular case. So again, what does it say? What error is tolerable for a particular matter? As an auditor, my tolerable error range could be different from what is your tolerable error range. What could be Himanshu's tolerable error range? What could be Malvika's tolerable error range? It is something which is subjective, completely subjective. Differs from person to person. For example, Mr. X may consider that his estimation of stores valuation an error of 2% may not be material. His tolerable level of error is 2%. For example, the company has valued its product, one of its stock, at rupees 100. And as an auditor, when I valued the stock applying the mathematical techniques and valuation procedures, it comes around 99. Okay, it's fine. It is within my tolerable range of 2%. I could get 98. Okay, it is fine. Within my tolerable range of 2%. I get 101. Okay, within my tolerable range of 2% error. I get 102 within my range. But as soon as I get 97 or 103, it is outside my tolerable error range. What आई हैव डिसाइडेड, मैंने अपने लिए 2% रखा है, हो सकता है हिमांशु अपने लिए 3% रखे, मालविका 5% तक एरर सही समझे कि 5% तक आई कैन लेट इट गो। तो मालविका 95 तक भी जाने देगी वैल्यूएशन, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, इट्स फाइन। हिमांशु 97 या 103 तक भी जाने देगा, कोई दिक्कत नहीं। बट इफ आई एम द ऑडिटर, मेरी रेंज 98 तक है या 102 तक। तो इट इज completely subjective, right? So while estimating stores, value of stores, error of 2% may not be material. ठीक? Next, he also decides that he needs at least 98% reliability of the result. So if error of 2%, more than 2% is material for him, less than 2% is immaterial. That means his reliability range is 98%. He is to pick up the requisite number of items of the stores for reliability of the result. The requisite number he can get from the random number table. Okay, this is a method of choosing samples. We'll be doing it in topics to follow. So he can use a specific sampling technique to choose sample to get 98% reliability. The question of reliability result is directly linked with the reliability of the internal control and of the books and records. We have done this. When these are satisfactory, lesser degree of reliability of the sampling estimation may suffice. If these are not satisfactory, the auditor may have to decide upon a higher degree of reliability, which can only be obtained from a larger sample. अगर इंटरनल कंट्रोल्स और बुक्स एंड रिकॉर्ड्स अच्छे हैं, सेटिस्फैक्ट्री हैं, तो ऑडिटर सैम्पलिंग के अंदर कम रिलायबिलिटी से, लेसर डिग्री ऑफ रिलायबिलिटी से भी सेटिस्फाई हो जाएगा। बट अगर इंटरनल कंट्रोल्स और बुक्स एंड रिकॉर्ड्स अच्छे नहीं हैं, वो सैम्पलिंग ज्यादा यूज करेगा, वो ज्यादा सैंपल्स निकालेगा, वो ज्यादा उनके ऊपर ऑडिट प्रोसेसेस करेगा, बिकॉज उसे हायर डिग्री ऑफ रिलायबिलिटी चाहिए। फर्स्ट केस में उसे हायर डिग्री ऑफ रिलायबिलिटी इंटरनल कंट्रोल्स और बुक्स एंड रिकॉर्ड से मिल रही थी, तो सैंपल्स में कम डिग्री ऑफ रिलायबिलिटी से भी काम चला सकता था। ही कुड सेटल अपॉन लेसर डिग्री ऑफ रिलायबिलिटी बाय ऑप्टिंग टू लेसर सैंपल्स। बट इफ दीज आर नॉट satisfactory and law of marginal utility, he needs higher satisfaction. For higher satisfaction, he'll perform higher sampling, large sampling, more sampling. Okay, चलिए. So these were the basics of samplings. We have come to the last part of part 1, general terms. Population. What is population? Population refers to the entire set of data from which a sample is selected and about which the auditor wishes to draw conclusions. See, this is a population, right? This box is the population, and this is a sample I have drawn. I'll apply my audit procedures on this sample, and then my results would be applied on the whole population. Suppose, okay, fine. Now, आप कहोगे सर भूख लगा रहे तो खाने की बातें करके, जो डेली लाइफ में एग्जांपल आती है वही यूज करनी है। Suppose this is a pizza. Now your friend asks, okay, pizza kaisa hai? How is it? So what will you do? You'll take a sample, one slice, you'll have it and tell him, it's okay, it's fine, it's yummy, it's not that good. So by eating just one slice, one sample, you have given your verdict for the whole pizza. Okay, another example. So the whole pizza is a population. The slice you chose was a sample. Suppose this is a particular city, city A. Now they have to check what is the rate of spread of COVID in this particular area. So what will they? They'll drive a sample from that area, from some people. They'll choose some people. They'll get their COVID checked, and if on the basis of this sample majority comes out with COVID positive, they could declare it a red zone or containment zone or highly positive zone. So that is what population is. And in our case, what could be the population? As I told you, it could be the turnover, the sales, the discount account, the fixed assets, the balance sheet items, the profit and loss items, the physical access controls, the data, the server. The auditor should select sample items in such a way that the sample can be expected to be representative of the population. This requires that all the items in the population have an opportunity of being selected. So you could take the slice from here as well, from here as well, here. You could take any slice. We are not biasing and we are not biased. We are not subjecting ourselves to bias while choosing the sample. Each and every item in the population should have an equal chance of getting selected. The homogeneous population, right? So that is why it is known as population, where each and every sample has an equal chance of being selected. That sample can only be representative of the population. That yes, whatever results we are getting from the sample, the same results we'll get if we apply our audit procedures on the population, each and every item of the population. What is mean by being representative? रिप्रेजेंटेटिव का क्या मतलब है? रिप्रेजेंटेटिव का मतलब है जो भी आप सैंपल के ऊपर अपने ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स लगा रहे हैं, जो भी उनका रिजल्ट आएगा, आप मान के चलेंगे अगर हम पूरी पॉपुलेशन के ऊपर भी, पूरे डेटा के ऊपर भी अगर हम वो अपने ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स लगाते तो यही रिजल्ट मिलता। हमने कुछ ग्रुप ऑफ अकाउंट्स चेक किए टर्नओवर के, राइट? हमने कुछ ग्रुप ऑफ अकाउंट्स टर्नओवर के चेक किए और हमें पता लगा एक कैटेगरी है, ए कैटेगरी, वेयर डिस्काउंट इज गिवन ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ नंबर ऑफ ऑर्डर्स। हमने 2 से 3 डेटर सिलेक्ट कर लिए इस कैटेगरी में से। इसमें 20 to 30 डेटर्स और नंबर ऑफ ऑर्डर्स के बेसिस पे हमने डिस्काउंट लगाया तो ऑलमोस्ट यूजुअल डिस्काउंट 10% के करीब जा रहा था। अब हमने जो ये डिस्काउंट निकाला, दैट इन दिस पर्टिकुलर कैटेगरी डिस्काउंट इज बीइंग गिवन टू द customer on the basis of number of orders purchased, or you could be number of units of stock purchased, number of units of stock. So whatever sample we draw from this category, if we get a result of 10%, then the discount value for this 20 to 30% group should be 10%. If it is less than that or more than that, then there is an error. And I'll do check upon that error. But if it comes around 10%, almost approximate 10%, then it's fine. My audit procedures are fine and it has given me the exact result as per the sample. The sample is representative of the population. ठीक? Characteristics of population. So The population should be appropriate. What do you mean by appropriate? Sahi. Appropriate means sahi, the right one. If we want to know, we have a factory of woolen garments. We have a factory of woolen garments, right? And we want to get a knowledge of the customer expectations with respect to the demand of woolen garments in the country. So where would we go? We'll go in the north for customer service, or we'll go down south in India. Tell me. अगर आपकी वुलन गारमेंट्स की फैक्ट्री है, आपको कस्टमर सर्वे करना है, और कस्टमर सर्वे करने के लिए आपको ऑब्वियसली कस्टमर्स, रैंडम कस्टमर से क्वेश्चंस पूछने होंगे, तो आप वुलन गारमेंट्स के ऊपर क्वेश्चन पूछने के लिए नॉर्थ में जाएंगे इंडिया के या साउथ में जाएंगे? कहां पर आपको अप्रोप्रिएट पॉपुलेशन मिलेगी? अप्रोप्रिएट मींस व्हिच इज स्पेसिफिक रेलेवेंट फॉर आवर ऑब्जेक्टिव. Obviously, in the north. Why would we go in the south? जहां पे ठंड इतनी होती नहीं है. South people wear cotton, silk. वूलन तो यही यूज होगा. अगर हम if we go down south for this survey, our population is not appropriate. If I want to check debtor balances, you will read you'll read about it in your chapter 9 as well. Okay, chaliye. So tell me, I am auditing the debtors. I am auditing the debtors, right? My population could cover which of these? Okay, tell me. I am auditing the debtors. Apart from the account of debtors, that is my population. But which else item of financial statements could also be my population related to debtors? Obviously, sales. And even in sales, that too, credit sales. Will purchases be the appropriate population for me? No. Had it been creditors, apart from creditors, my population could have been purchases also. If we are checking the depreciation, yes, fixed assets. So what population is appropriate is very much important. The auditor will need to determine that the population from which the sample is drawn is appropriate for our specific audit objective. We are auditing the debtors. Our audit objective is auditing the debtors, credit sales, recoveries, the operating cycle period, the recovery period, debtors turnover ratio, debtors velocity. Then apart from debtors, sales and that to credit sales could be our appropriate population and not purchases, not fixed assets. Appropriate means population from which the samples are drawn shall be relevant for the specific objective under audit. This is because when the samples are drawn, the audit procedures are applied on the sample, and conclusions are projected on the population. So what is the meaning of projection? What is the meaning of projection? See, these are debtors. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we go to 1000. We have selected a sample of, let's say, 500 debtors. We apply our audit procedures on these 500 or debtors accounts. We conclude as an auditor and get results. Now, whatever we have done on these 500 debtors and come out with the conclusion or results, we apply it to be the case on all the 1000 debtors. When we apply the results of our sampling units on the whole population, that is known as projecting the results. This is known as projecting the results. जो सैंपल पे आपने अपने ऑडिट प्रोसीजर लगाए और आपने पूरे अपने पॉपुलेशन के ऊपर उसे इवैल्यूएशन में डाल दिया, जो भी आपने यहाँ पे कंक्लूड करा, जो भी रिजल्ट निकाला, आपने वो पूरी पॉपुलेशन के लिए मान लिया, उसे बोलते हैं प्रोजेक्टिंग द रिजल्ट. अगर मैं कहूंगा 500 डेटर्स मैंने चेक किए, जिसमें से 10% के करीब ऐसे अकाउंट्स हैं विच आर bad debtors. Which are bad debtors? Bad debtors means a provision should be created for such debtors. Now, when I project it over here, that means I could say 10% of these debtors. Now, it will be difficult which debtors. So, we'll go by amounts. We will go by amounts. Whatever amount we got over here with 500 debtors, we wanted to create a provision for 10% of the debtors. That means 50 debtors amounts, right? It could be 50,000, it could be anything. Now, when we project the results on 1000 debtors, we'll create provision for doubtful debts for 100 debtors. If they are homogeneous debtors, if they are different values, we could go with 10% of the amount, 10% of the total amount. This is known as projecting the results of the samples on the population. ठीक? Okay. It is important for the auditor to ensure that the population is appropriate to the objective of the audit procedure, which will include consideration of direction of testing. In what direction we want to test the samples. The population should be appropriate in that case. For example, if the auditor's objective were to test for overstatement of accounts receivable, auditor wants to check that the debtor balances, accounts receivable debtor, the debtor balances in the balance sheet are overstated. Overstated means if they are of value 100, they have been overstated at 110. The population could be defined as the accounts receivable listing, the accounts of the debtors. Now, when testing for understatement of accounts payable, the auditor says that as far as my procedures, my observation is concerned, the value of creditors should be 10 lakhs. But I doubt that the organization has shown it at 9 lakhs. It is understated. The population would not be the accounts payable listing, but rather subsequent disbursements, unpaid invoices, supplier statements, and unmatched receiving reports. I'll know if I'll see if the debtors have been overstated. If the debtors have been overstated, जितने हैं उससे ज्यादा दिखा रखे हैं, तो मैं debtors के accounts check करूंगा क्या actual value उतनी बनती है. बट अदर वे राउंड, अगर कोई अकाउंट फॉर एग्जांपल क्रेडिटर्स का अकाउंट है वो अंडरस्टेटेड है, 1 लाख का है, 90,000 दिखाया हुआ है, दैट मींस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वांट्स टू शो अ गुड पिक्चर. तो मैं क्रेडिटर्स नहीं जाके चेक करूंगा. व्हाट वुड आई चेक? अंडरस्टेटेड है. व्हाट वुड आई चेक? क्या if there are any subsequent disbursements by the organization to the creditors, if there are any invoices which are still to be unpaid for that particular period or financial year, I'll ask for third party confirmation. I'll ask the organization to get a statement of account from the supplier. उनसे उनकी बुक्स के अकॉर्डिंग क्या अकाउंट है, आपका करंट अकाउंट है, वो मंगवा के दीजिए. अनमैच्ड रिसीविंग रिपोर्ट्स. व्हाट आर द रिसीविंग रिपोर्ट्स? आपके पास स्टॉक आया, आपने रिकॉर्ड किया है, नहीं किया. So this is how the appropriate population varies from case to case. Okay. The population should be complete in all respects. So whatever activity the auditor has planned, the population should include all relevant items. Whatever should form part of the population. If population is complete in all respects, the conclusion drawn on population will be considered to be reasonable. It should not be like that. If we are doing the audit of fixed assets and we would say we have to draw a sample, sir, fixed asset register is missing. We can tell you how many fixed assets we have. I could check it out from the fixed asset register or the ledger accounts, how many fixed assets, what is the composition of fixed assets of the company. If I'm not getting records with respect to the air conditioners in the factory, or with the number of vehicles being run by the factory, being run by the organization, population is not complete. The population could be with respect to one particular asset or the whole category of assets. But again, there would be a limitation on my work that a population is not complete. It should be reliable. When performing the audit sampling, the auditor performs audit procedures to ensure that the information upon which the audit sampling is performed is sufficiently complete and accurate. So you are auditing debtors. We have still to check upon certain debtor accounts and provide for their provision. There are certain bad debts which still need to be adjusted. तो कीजिए, वो कर मुझे दीजिए audit करने के लिए. Whatever you have to do, you have to make a provision, you have to certify certain debtors as bad debts, please कीजिए. Whatever population which I am having in my head, it should be reliable. It should be complete and accurate. For a check basis, it should not be the case that you have created 50% provision for doubtful debt and you're giving it to me. It was not yet final in the board meeting what estimation of provision, what accounting estimate you were using to provide provision for doubtful debts or bad debts. So whatever population data I am getting, it should be complete and accurate. Auditor should obtain evidence about the reliability of population. If population is not reliable with respect to accuracy and source, the sample drawn will definitely not be relevant for the specific audit objective. My objective is defeated. If the population is not accurate, how can the sample be accurate? And if the sample is not accurate, what is the reason of me performing audit procedures on that sample? Himanshu, subsequent disbursement means in आपके पास स्टॉक आने के बाद, रिकॉर्ड होने के बाद, आपने जब अपने अकाउंट्स प्रिपेयर किए उसके बाद आपने, इट कुड बी ईयर एंड और इट कुड बी अ पीरियड एंड, आपने उसके बाद उन्हें डिसबर्समेंट की, राइट? ठीक, आपने उसके बाद उन्हें पेमेंट भेजी, पेमेंट की क्रेडिटर्स को. What is the sampling unit? The individual items that make up the population are known as sampling units. The debtor accounts and debtors, the invoices in the sales, or by the name if you are selling it, credit sales, cash sales. So the composition, the units of the population, what is it? The slices of the pizza are the population, are the sampling units. The population can be divided into sampling units in a variety of ways. I could divide a class, I could divide you people on the basis of students from north, students from west, students from east, students from south, students from center. I could ask from the north people. If I'm from north, I'll ask, मौसम कैसा है? But I'm sitting in north. So I could ask from the people from the south, वहां पर मौसम कैसा है? East में कैसा है? West में कैसा है? So what I am asking is, I am targeting the sampling units of my sampling units from the southern region, from the western region, from the central region. I could divide you on the basis of gender. I could divide you on the basis of students who have entered through direct entry route or the foundation route. I could divide you on the criteria, whosoever has studied for group 1 and who is studying for directly for group 2. There could be different criteria on the basis of which I could divide the population and extract my samples. It is a selection from the population that is used as an extrapolation of the population. What is extrapolation? The projection I told you. हम थोड़ी चीजों पे जो अपने प्रोसीजर लगा रहे हैं उसको पूरे पॉपुलेशन पे जब प्रोजेक्ट करते हैं उसे एक्सट्रापोलेशन बोलते हैं. Whatever results, operations we are procedure we are applying on the samples and then we project it on the whole population, that is means extrapolation. It is a statistical term. Audit procedures are applied on these units and the conclusions drawn from them are projected on the population. Conclusion drawn on the sample becomes the conclusion of the population from where it is drawn. The sample must be large enough to provide statistically meaningful results. आप एग्जाम की तैयारी कर रहे हैं, 10th का एग्जाम है, आपके मैथ्स के चैप्टर्स हैं, आप क्या करेंगे? Each chapter has 20 questions. So we'll select some questions belonging to each category. Some 1 mark questions, some 3 marks questions, some 5 marks questions. So the sampling unit should be relevant. ऐसा ना हो आप हर चैप्टर खोलें, whatever is the first question you have done, okay, chapter done. Whatever is the first question in the next chapter, done. पहला क्वेश्चन तो बहुत इजी होता है, धीरे धीरे जब आप चैप्टर में आगे बढ़ते हैं तो क्वेश्चंस का डिफिकल्टी लेवल बढ़ता है. What is the trend we have seen while studying for our higher secondaries? आप क्या करेंगे? पहला चैप्टर में पहला क्वेश्चन किया, ओके. सेकंड चैप्टर पहला क्वेश्चन किया, ओके, मेरे को चैप्टर आता है. थर्ड मेरे को चैप्टर आता है. सैम्पलिंग यूनिट इज नॉट अप्रोप्रिएट, right? The sample must be large enough to provide statistically meaningful results. आप ऑडिट के एग्जाम की तैयारी कर रहे हैं तो क्या आप एक चैप्टर में से 2 क्वेश्चन करेंगे, कहेंगे ना इनफ, मेरा चैप्टर प्रिपेयर हो गया? You will at least prepare a good quantity of questions, number of questions, and then you'll say, yes, my chapter is complete, revision is complete. That is why that will provide statistically meaningful results. The sampling unit should be that much. If the auditor's objective were to test the validity of accounts receivables, whether the accounts receivables, the debtor balances are valid or not, the sampling unit could be defined as customer balances or individual customer invoices. I'll check the bills. The auditor defines the sampling unit in order to obtain an efficient and effective sample to achieve particular audit objective. The sampling unit should be efficient and effective. Efficient, it should be representative of the whole population. Effective, whatever results we get from the sample could be projected on the population as well. Okay, Himanshu, paper is also sampling, Mohit. नहीं हिमांशु, हम एग्जाम्पल डेटर्स के लेके चल रहे हैं ना. It is actually based upon criteria, individual items. It could be a group of debtors, it could be individual debtors. That depends upon the criteria you select. It could be even a group of debtors from the north zone. अब देखो ना, अगर मैं आपको बताता हूं that I have to make groups from the north zone, right? Or I'll have to make a group of the boys from the population. Individual items could be boys, girls, other genders. So each and every item that makes up the population is the sampling unit. Yes, debtors are the sampling units. But हमारे सैंपल में हमारा सैम्पलिंग यूनिट क्या होगा, ये हमारे क्राइटेरिया पे डिपेंड करता है. हमारी एग्जांपल में अलग अलग जगह पे इंडिविजुअल आ रहा है, तो यहाँ पे इंडिविजुअल आइटम मतलब वट एवर इज इंडिविजुअल आइटम. Item is based upon criteria. It could be a debtor, it could be a group of debtors, it could be one stock, it could be a group of stock having common features. Okay. Yes. No, not criteria, Himanshu. Individual doesn't mean criteria. Individual is dependent upon the criteria chosen by you. The individual item depends upon the criteria chosen by you in the population. If you divide suppose, let me tell you. Okay, wait. See, we have fruit, right? We have apples, we have oranges, we have grapes. Okay. I could draw a sample of fruit. I want a fruit basket, right? I want a fruit basket. So my sample would have, I would say, 2 apples, 2 oranges, 2 veins of grapes. If I want only an apple basket, right, I could say 2 apples, 2 apple juices made me this basket. Now here individual item is any fruit. Apples, oranges, grapes, they are the individual items. In apple basket, apples, apple juices. The criteria over here is apple. Here the criteria is fruit. These are the individual items. Okay, Mohit, that was what I was going to ask. So before we go to stratification, tolerable misstatement, tolerable rate of deviation, let us take a break of, I suppose 15 minutes would be enough. Okay, it's 7:35 and we'll meet at 7:50 or 7:45. Okay, Let's be here by 7:45 or max by 7:50. I'll take queries between 7:45 and 7:50, and then 7:50 will start with the leftover portion for today's session, the balance portion, right? Okay, let's take a break till 7:50. Okay, we are back. Avdesh, yes, you are right. It could be one of the criterias. And Malvika. Malvika, example on the basis of which a sample of related party disclosures. Okay. So related party disclosures could be purchases from related parties, or salaries, commission, rent, other expenses paid to related parties. You know, we need to know this: names, nature of transaction. We could also check for sales made to related parties to check whether they are not being given higher discounts. Right? It could be the case. So this could be basic criteria of selecting samples from related parties. Bhumika, whatever results we get from the samples, when we project it, this projecting the results onto the population, it is done by a statistical technique called extrapolation. Right? Bhumika, are we clear? Okay, what is stratification? The process of dividing a population into subpopulation, each of which is a group of sampling units which have similar characteristics, often monetary value. For example, there are debtors. I could divide them into debtors with less than value, debtors of 3 months old, debtor 6 months old, debtor more than 1 year old. That is known as stratification. एक पर्टिकुलर पॉपुलेशन को मैं सब पॉपुलेशन में डिवाइड करता हूं ऑन एनी क्राइटेरिया, और हर सब पॉपुलेशन के अपने अलग अलग सैम्पलिंग यूनिट होंगे. दिस इज नोन एज स्ट्रेटिफिकेशन. Mostly it is decided upon the monetary value, but you can take any criteria. Usually it is monetary value. Take that is stratification. See, you have an example over here: defect quantity and date. So machine wise, we have stratified the defects. Machine 1 graph, machine 2 graph, machine 3 graph. That is stratification. Dividing a population into subpopulation, we have divided the defects. We have divided the defects machine wise into subpopulation. That is a sampling unit. Tolerable misstatement. A monetary amount. A monetary amount set aside. A monetary amount set by the auditor in respect of which the auditor seeks to obtain an appropriate level of assurance that the monetary amount set by the auditor is not exceeded by the actual misstatement in the population. टॉलरेबल misstatement, चलिए देखते हैं. As an auditor, I would say Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm checking the discount paid or discount given account. What I find is that in almost 10 cases, there is a difference. This is the recorded amount. This is as per the auditor, and this is the difference. So in almost 10 cases, whatever was the recorded amount was the amount as calculated by the auditor, and difference is nil. In 20 of the cases, the recorded amount was, let us suppose, the difference between the recorded and the auditor's calculation of discount was approximately 2000. Further, in 15 cases, this difference, as recorded in the books and as calculated by the auditor, the discount amount, the difference was 6000. Now, auditor is auditing a concern which has turnover in crores. The discount paid is also in crores. Let us say it is 100 crores and discount paid is 2 crores. Okay. Auditor has set up a level of monetary amount of tolerable level. Auditor has set up a tolerable level of rupees 5000. So whatever is within or less than equal to rupees 5000, that is within the tolerable range of the auditor. This much error is okay. But when the difference between the recorded amount and the auditor amount exceeds this value, let's see over here in these cases, then the auditor gets cautious. He'll say, okay, that is fine. That is below my tolerable level, misstatement level. But this is greater than my tolerable misstatement level. I have to work upon this, apply more audit procedures in these cases of discount paid. So what is he saying? It says a monetary amount, which was a monetary amount in our case, 5000. In our case, it was 5000. Set by the auditor in respect of which the auditor seeks to obtain an appropriate level of assurance that the monetary amount set by the auditor is not exceeded by the actual misstatement in the population. So auditor's objective here is that the actual misstatement should be less than or equal to 5000. It should not be more than 5000. This is auditor's objective. I have to obtain this assurance that misstatement level in the books should not be greater than 5000. That is what my tolerable misstatement level as set by the auditor. Now further, what is tolerable rate of deviation? A rate of deviation from prescribed internal control procedures set by the auditor in respect of which the auditor seeks to obtain an appropriate level of assurance that the rate of deviation set by the auditor is not exceeded by the actual rate of deviation in the population. Now see, test of controls and test of details. This is test of controls. This is test of details. In test of controls, tolerable misstatement level. In test of controls, tolerable rate of deviation. So how tolerable? Now you understand tolerable level, not tolerable rate of deviation. Tolerable misstatement level is always with respect to test of details. Tolerable rate of deviation will always be with respect to controls. For example, I've set my tolerable rate of deviation at 20%. Now this is a case of controls. So what it could be? So what it could be? Tolerable rate of deviation. Let us take the example of biometrics. So I check the biometrics performance by any ways, whatever is data available with the organization. I have tolerable rate of deviation is 20%. For example, in any 100 cases, 100 attendances where biometrics was used, there could be case of only 20 cases where biometrics failed. If such cases are less than equal to 20, they are within my tolerable rate of deviation of controls. Controls deviating from what they are intended to perform. जो कंट्रोल्स को काम करना चाहिए वो उसे डेविएट कर रहे हैं, वैसा काम नहीं कर रहे हैं, ऐसे केसेस लेस देन इक्वल टू टॉलरेबल रेट ऑफ डेविएशन होंगे तो मेरी टॉलरेंस के अंदर है. एक भी केस अगर ज्यादा हुआ तो मेरी टॉलरेबल रेट ऑफ डेविएशन को वो क्रॉस कर. Another example, CCTV cameras. There are 50 cameras installed in the organization. My tolerable rate is 20%. That means at least there could be error or deficiency in at the most 10. 50 कैमरास का मैंने ऑडिट किया, अगर किसी 10 में खराबी निकली, इट इज विद इन माई टॉलरेबल रेंज. पर 50 में से अगर 2 खराब, 5 खराब, 7 खराब, 10 खराब, ओके, जैसे ये 10 क्रॉस करेगा, 12, 15, 20, 30, these are exceeding my tolerable rate of deviation. इस केस में I have to be very much particular. Materiality is something which has a general parlance. Tolerable level is something which is auditor specific over here, Darshan. So tolerable rate of deviation is with respect to controls, and tolerable misstatement is with respect to financial statement level. Now coming to, after we are finished with the terms, we are coming to the sampling approaches. There could be statistical sampling. There could be non-statistical sampling as well. Statistical as well as non-statistical sampling. Sampling where the sample is chosen by applying certain mathematical and statistical methods. There are proper formulae, mathematics, statistical techniques. So that method is known as statistical sampling. You have done statistical methods in your foundation level or graduation level, right? So we could use any statistical techniques. Probability, that is a statistical technique of choosing sample. Features of statistical sampling, this is an approach to sampling that has a random selection of sample items. Random, any sample could be chosen. We use probability theory to evaluate the sample results, and use of probability theory including measurement of sampling risk. So what is sampling risk? We'll come to that. Statistical approach is basically that approach where we randomly select samples using some mathematical and statistical methods or formulae. Okay. What is non-statistical sampling? Sampling where the sample size and its composition are determined on the basis of personal experience and knowledge of the auditor. Auditor does not want to go by the formulae or set criteria. Auditor say, my experience, my knowledge, I'll see from where I have to pick the sample. you would read, when you would study in school, a stranger teacher who doesn't know about your class and he is asked to pick the students who are good in sports, how would he be able to pick, he or she? He'll say, okay, come on, let's organize a race, a spoon race, or let's organize a PT session or something like that. So he or she is using some technique, a formula. I'll see who is good, who is not good, right? But your own PT teacher, not a stranger, your own PT teacher or your class teacher would be knowing, yes, who is good in sports. Your class teacher would be preparing your reports on your level of activity in sports. So he or she would be knowing, yes, this particular student is good in sports. Yes, we can pick him. We can choose him for the sports competition, inter-school sports competition. We can choose him as well or her as well on the basis of personal experience and knowledge of your class teacher. Personal experience dealing with you. So this is how statistical and non-statistical sampling works. The auditor, on the basis of his personal experience, will determine the size of the sample and express it in terms that number of pages or personal accounts in the purchases or sales ledger to be checked. For example, March, June, September may be selected in a year one, and different months would be selected in the next year on the basis of value of items, top highest value items. Auditor says, don't want to go for random sampling. I'll check 10 highest values accounts. Now it is auditor's personal judgment. The auditor would make it sure that the client organization should not get comfortable with my method. So an attempt would be made to avoid establishing a pattern of selection year after year, that is way of selecting samples to maintain an element of surprise within the client organization. It is a common practice to check large number of items towards the close of the year so that adequacy of cutoff procedures can also be determined. Also, because year-end transactions are prone to high risk of misoperation. Why? Why year-end large transactions? Because there's a high chance of window dressing at year-end, where financial figures are played with. The non-statistical sampling is criticized on the ground that it is neither objective nor scientific, because your mathematical techniques, formulae, and statistical techniques they are scientific. They have their derived formulae and they are objective. This becomes subjective, personal experience and knowledge. A formula or technique applied by auditor A, B, C would give the same result, but personal experience and knowledge of A, B, and C would differ and will give different results. The expected degree of objectivity cannot be assured in non-statistical sampling because the risk of personal bias is personal opinion, personal experience of the auditors, cannot be eliminated. A particular sample could be important from auditor A's point of view based upon his personal experience, but it could be irrelevant for auditor B based upon his personal experience. The closeness of qualities projected by the sample results with that of the whole population cannot be measured because the sample has not been selected as per mathematical and statistical techniques. It depends completely upon the auditor's experience and knowledge, keeping in mind his history with the client as well as his understanding of the client's business. This method, non-statistical method, is simple to operate, but sometimes the sample may not be a true representative of the total population because of personal bias and no science involved in selecting the sample. Now we are comparing statistical and non-statistical. Audit testing done through statistical approach is more scientific than testing based entirely on auditor's own judgment. Obviously, statistical approach, mathematical laws of probability. science-based. Statistical sampling has reasonably wide application, where a population to be tested consists of a large number of similar items, basically homogeneous population, where each and every item has an equal chance of selection. So statistical sampling is widely applied over there. And more in the case of transactions involving compliance testing, trade receivables. These are all examples. Compliance testing means where your accounts, your records, your transactions are complying, are as per the legal rules and procedures. There is no personal bias of the auditor in case of statistical sampling because it is scientific, and results would be the same in case of every auditor. In larger organizations with huge transactions, statistical sampling is always recommended. Why so? Because it is unbiased and samples selected are not prejudged. Because we cannot risk with your non-statistical technique in case of large organizations. In case of smaller organizations, auditor's personal experience and his judgment are quite good because the transactions are less, and almost even if he draws samples, almost he'll pick up all such transactions or balances which would be representing the population. For example, an auditor, while verifying the purchases during the year, realized that the purchase transaction in that year are more than 45,000 in number. Then in such a case, statistical sampling will be highly recommended in the audit program. 45,000 purchase transactions. Random sampling, as discussed ahead in this topic, is the method you decide to choose sample in such a situation. These methods we'll be doing in our next session, the methods of sampling. So how is statistical sampling, which method is more appropriate in what circumstances? In statistical sampling, the sample results are measurable as to the adequacy and reliability of the audit objectives. Whereas in non-statistical sampling, the auditor's opinion determines the sample size, but it cannot be measured how far the sample size would fulfill the audit objective. See, in statistical sampling, we are sure that whatever sample we have drawn, it is adequate. It will be representing the population. It would be enough, and we can rely on it. But in case of non-statistical sampling, ऑडिटर ने अपनी मर्जी से चूज किया है, उसकी पर्सनल थिंकिंग यूज हुई है, तो पर्सनल बायस होगा वहां पे, और वी कुड नेवर बी श्योर वेदर जो सैंपल उसने सिलेक्ट किया है वो पॉपुलेशन को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहा है या नहीं कर रहा. Whatever sample he has selected, he or she, whether it will be applicable on the whole population or not. So what are the advantages of statistical sampling over non-statistical sampling? The amount of testing does not increase in proportion to the increase in size of the area, the population. The sample size remains the same because it is a homogeneous population. You pick up any sample, but in case of non-statistical, you might have different versions. Okay, I'll extract 2 samples from this portion, 2 from this, 3 from this, because my personal judgment is involved. The sample selection is more objective and thereby more defensible. Defensible means that can be proved with logic. Statistical method provides the means of estimating the minimum sample size associated with a specified risk and precision, because maths is involved, stats is involved, precision would be there to the mark. It provides a means for deriving a calculated risk, the risk we can take with sampling. What is sampling risk? Basically, when we are using sampling, there could be a risk that we could not be able to spot a misstatement. Yeah, we could not be able to get a misstatement rectified. ठीक? That is a sampling risk while using sampling techniques. And corresponding precision is a sampling error. That is the probable difference in result due to the use of a sample in lieu of examining all the records in the universe using the same procedure. What is sampling error? Basically, the results obtained from the sample are projected on the whole population. So there could be some differences. Had those procedures been applied on the whole population, the results would have been a bit different. That difference in the results when you apply your audit procedures on the sample, and if they could have been applied on the 100% population, that term is known as sampling error. The error which could be there because of sampling. We could even come with a sampling factor. We will see this in our next chapter, next session, that to correct this sampling error, we could go by plus minus 1%, plus minus 5 to rectify this sampling error. We always go by this. We develop a range that there could be a sampling error always. We should develop a range that the results of the population would be falling between this range. So sampling risk की वजह से जो sampling डिफरेंस आता है सैंपल और पॉपुलेशन के ऊपर लगाए गए ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स के रिजल्ट में उसे सैम्पलिंग एरर बोलते हैं. The difference in the results, if the procedures which have been applied on the sample would have been applied on the whole population, because of the sampling risk, is known as sampling error. Right? It may provide a better description of a large mass of data than a complete examination of all the data, since non-sampling errors such as processing and clerical mistakes are not as large. These are small sampling errors, or non-sampling errors are not that big a deal. Now, we discussed statistical. Now, in which cases non-statistical is more appropriate? Under some audit circumstances, statistical methods may not be appropriate, where we have to use non-statistical techniques and the techniques which are based upon auditor's personal experience and judgment. Which could be the cases? The auditor should not attempt to use statistical sampling when another approach is either necessary or will provide satisfactory information in less time or with less effort. For example, when exact accuracy is required, or in case of legal requirement. When we require 100% results, we require to check each and every transaction, or in the case of legal requirements, we have to check each and everything, or samples based upon our personal judgment on the basis of knowledge of law. In that case, you cannot go by mathematical techniques. If a particular, for example, in bank audit, there is a requirement of reporting of accounts where fraud is involved for more than rupees 2 crores. In that case, auditor cannot say, I'll use mathematical technique, or in that particular mathematical technique, there could be a case where that particular account or group of accounts could not fall in that sample. There is a legal requirement. So in that case, auditor will not go by mathematical techniques, but he'll use his personal experience and judgment, and he'll check all such accounts without going for sampling in this particular group. For accounts less than rupees 2 crores, he can use sampling, but he cannot use sampling all the way throughout. Whether these 2 crore accounts fall in the sample or not, this would not be appropriate over here. Sometimes the audit staff has no knowledge about sampling technique used. In such circumstances, using statistical sampling becomes complex and inappropriate. In that case, the auditor has to give them a list. He or she has to give them some criteria on the basis of which they'll be checking the accounts or the balances. They'll not be asked to use sampling techniques because they are not well versed with the knowledge of using sampling as statistical techniques. Now, the last topic for the day, what is sampling risk? Sampling is performed on test of controls, as I told you, to identify deviations. You remember tolerable rate of deviation from expected internal controls. What internal controls are expected to be in place in the organization, and what is their actual state? The difference is known as deviation. And in test of details, as we've done, to identify misstatements of account balances and class of transactions. Account balances you find in balance sheet, and class of transactions you find in profit transactions. Basically, profit and loss gives us a summary of transactions, and balance sheets gives us a summary of account balances. So misstatements identify करने के लिए sampling process को test of details पे test किया जाता है, और controls को test करने के लिए भी sampling use होती है to identify deviations. We have done this in the starting of the session today? What is test of controls? What is test of details? So what is sampling risk now? The risk that the auditor's conclusion based on a sample may be different from the conclusion if the entire population were subjected to the same audit procedures. What does it say? It says the risk that the auditor's conclusion, whatever conclusion auditor has reached based upon applying his audit procedures on the sample, it could be different from the conclusion if such procedures were subjected to the same, were applied on the population, if the same procedures. So that risk is called sampling risk, and the difference we get is called the sampling error. This risk will always be in existence when auditor uses sampling technique. If the acceptable sampling risk is low, larger sample size is needed. This is risk appetite of the auditor. This is risk appetite of the auditor. अगर ऑडिटर को लगता है भी वो कम से कम रिस्क रखना चाहता है, वो ज्यादा से ज्यादा बड़ा सैंपल बनाएगा, ज्यादा से ज्यादा यूनिट्स लेके आएगा सैंपल में, ज्यादा से ज्यादा टेस्टिंग करेगा ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स के थ्रू. पर अगर ऑडिटर का रिस्क एपेटाइट ज्यादा है, वो ज्यादा रिस्क ले सकता है, ज्यादा रिस्क एक्सेप्ट कर सकता है. इफ द एक्सेप्टेबल सैम्पलिंग रिस्क इज हायर, स्मॉलर सैंपल साइज इज नीडेड बिकॉज ऑडिटर कम ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स अप्लाई करना चाहता है. ऑडिट प्रोसीजर अप्लाई करना चाहता है पर कम वैल्यूज पे, बिकॉज उसको कंट्रोल्स ठीक लग रहे हैं एंड हिज एक्सेप्टेबल सैम्पलिंग रिस्क इज हाई. ओके, सो सैम्पलिंग रिस्क की वजह से क्या प्रॉब्लम हो सकती है? सैम्पलिंग रिस्क कैन लीड टू टू टाइप्स ऑफ erroneous conclusions. The auditor could reach to erroneous conclusions. What are that? In the case of a test of controls, so while testing controls, the controls are more effective than they actually are. The auditor could come to a conclusion, yes, controls are good, but in actual, controls are not that good. Or in case of test of details, that is testing the transactions and account balances, a material misstatement does not exist, but when in fact it does. The sampling risk is there. When we applied our audit procedures on the sample, it gave us a result that internal controls are effective or material misstatements are not there. But actually, if we had we applied the procedures on the whole population, we could have found deficiency in internal controls. We could have found material misstatements in that test of details. The auditor is primarily concerned with this type of error in conclusion because it affects audit effectiveness. Why audit effectiveness? Effective word is related with results. The results are erroneous. The conclusions are erroneous. And it will lead to an inappropriate audit opinion. Because the auditor has over-relied on the internal controls. The auditor has become highly liberal in his approach. He has over-relied on the internal controls. So he has done less work. Because of that, sampling risk was high, and he came up with a happy picture, but at the back end, the scene was not happy. Audit effectiveness is hampered with. Another kind of erroneous conclusion could be, now if effectiveness we have done, now it would be related with efficiency. The controls are less effective than they actually are, or in the case of test of details, a material mistake exists when in fact it does not. Auditor would come with the conclusion, controls are not that good, they are not operating effectively. He was going to check 50 cameras and he checked just first of the 3 cameras, and he went on to check only those 3 cameras which were not working properly out of the 50 cameras. 47 were working very well. 3 cameras were not working properly, and he came to a conclusion that internal controls are not good. Balki, when 47 cameras were working properly, the error was less than 10%. But he came with the conclusion, controls are not good. Or in the case of test of detail, he could come up with a conclusion that a material misstatement exists, when in fact, while applying on the whole population, this misstatement does not exist. He could come up with a debtor account where provision for doubtful debts was passed at 200% by mistake. He said, okay, I cannot believe you. You could have made a provision of 200% on all the debtors, but when all the debtors were to be checked, the provision was appropriate by 20%. It was only in this case where it was by mistake entered as 200%, and this was only case sample picked up by the auditor. So what happened? Auditor is conservative in approach. His risk appetite is low. This type of erroneous conclusion affects audit efficiency. How would it affect audit efficiency? Now, auditor has found that controls are not working properly, or there is material misstatement. He would draw more samples. He would do more work. If he does more work, more time is involved, more effort is involved, efficiency is affected. Because it would lead to additional work to establish that the initial conclusion, the 3 cameras which were not operating effectively, but the only cameras were not operating effectively, we checked all the other 47 cameras and they were working effectively. It was only in one case where by mistake 200% provision was created. We checked each and every debtor and 20% was there, or we checked 90% of such items. So audit efficiency is affected because auditor put under reliance on controls and his substantive procedures got increased. His risk of giving wrong opinion is minimum. So what happened? Audit effectiveness is increased. Risk of wrong opinion is minimum. When he is doing such a detailed and extensive checking, risk of wrong opinion is minimum. But detailed checking would affect the efficiency. Here, efficiency is good, but effectiveness is not there. Here, effectiveness is there, but efficiency is not there. So these are the 2 types of erroneous conclusions which the auditor has to deal with while using sampling. Sampling risk gives rise to these 2 types of errors. This is what we have summarized. If there is under reliance, we are not relying upon the internal controls, there could be risk of incorrect rejection. Incorrect rejection means that the auditor is conservative in his approach and he could say, no, I don't believe you. I would work more. Leads to inefficiency in the conduct of audit. Now, when the auditor places over-reliance on a test of controls, there could be risk of incorrect acceptance. He is accepting, yes, your controls are good. There is no misstatement, which is incorrect. Whatever he is accepting, that is incorrect. Here, whatever he is rejecting is incorrect. And he will work less. Effectiveness is hampered. Erroneous audit opinion. Okay, that is what sampling risk is. That is what sampling risk was. Now coming to non-sampling risk. The risk not related anyway with sampling is non-sampling risk. The risk that the auditor reaches an erroneous conclusion for any reason not related to sampling risk, not related to sampling. It could be like underperformance by the audit staff or use of wrong audit procedures. C, using inappropriate audit procedures, misinterpretation of audit evidence or law, failure to recognize a misstatement or deviation in controls. And non-sampling risk cannot be mathematically measured because you have not applied a mathematical technique. Whereas in sampling, when you apply a mathematical technique, you can measure the risk as well mathematically. But in non-sampling risk, it cannot be mathematically measured. It could sources of non-sampling risk could be human mistakes by audit staff, misinterpreting the sample results. Sample results are okay, but you are interpreting them wrong. Applying audit procedures not appropriate to the objectives of the audit. you have to check the existence of fixed asset. We are checking it from the ledger records only. Relying on erroneous information. Example, okay, I want to check how many ACs are there in the factory. The ledger shows 10. I want to check them physically. I've checked 5. Okay, sir, 5 और हैं, ठीक है, आप 10 कर दीजिए. Okay. But only 8 were there installed in the factory. While in books, 10 ACs were recorded. So relying on erroneous information or erroneous confirmation. This is non-sampling risk for you. Okay, so we are done with today's part. We are done with today's part of the sampling chapter. We have covered it with till sampling risk. In the next lecture, we'll do the sampling process. How is sampling carried out? What factors do you need to take care of while designing a sample? What factors would you need to take care of while considering the size of sample? Which method you have to use? What audit procedures you have to apply? Then, whatever deviations in internal controls or misstatements in test of details you have found, what is their nature? Projecting them to the whole population and then evaluating the results. So we'll be taking up each step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps. We'll be taking them in detail each step. Sample design, size, method, procedures, deviations, projections, and evaluating results. This is the last part of this chapter we'll be covering in our next session. Any doubts as of today, please come up with it. Any doubts for today, please? Or any queries? Ahmed, while using samples, there could be a risk that whatever result we have got from the sample, it might not be true for the whole population. That level of risk is known as sampling risk. Right? Is that fine now, Ahmed? Please let me know. Okay, I suppose no more doubts. Fine then. Wishing you a good night over here, and we'll meet you on Tuesday, 25th of April. And we'll finish this chapter of ours, audit sampling. Right? Okay, take care everyone. Good night.